Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Cavan-Smith. Tonight, South Africa vows to recover around 110 million euros worth of cash allegedly looted by executives and politicians from the collapsed VBS bank. It's one of the country's most serious graft cases. Also, Cameroonians are hoping that the re-election of Paul Biya to another 7-year term after 35 years at the helm could still mean a change for the better rather than an extension of the worst of the status quo. And as more African and Asian countries caution their people against taking jobs as domestic workers in the Middle East, we hear from a group of Cameroonian girls back at home after allegedly suffering abuse at the hands of their employers. But first, it's been dubbed the Great Bank Heist. Fraud so extensive that it led to the looting of an estimated 112 million euros worth of money from South Africa's VBS mutual bank in just 3 years. On Tuesday, Pretoria vowed to recover the missing cash. 53 people, including executives and politicians, have been accused of siphoning off money meant for poor communities. VBS collapsed into administration earlier this year in one of the most serious graft cases to hit the country since Jacob Zuma, former president, exited in February. For a closer look at all of this, we're joined by Aisha Ishmael. Aisha, tell us a little bit more about how a graft case at a private bank is somehow involved in siphoning off cash for poor communities.
Well, this is a very, very big story in South Africa. Everybody's talking about it. It's all over social media. But how it was possible for, as you say, 112 million euros to be siphoned off by this bank. The bank has been looted. The money in that bank belonged to poor people, poor communities. It was also money that was invested by municipalities in 3 provinces in South Africa. But what is interesting to note is that these municipalities were warned by the Treasury and told not to invest in the VBS Mutual Bank. And municipal managers went against this warning and invested millions and millions of South African rand in this bank. Now, the money given to the municipalities was meant for the upgrading of provinces. It was also meant for service delivery. Service delivery is a big issue in South Africa. Poor people are always complaining that services are not being delivered to them. And the money that we're talking about that has been looted was meant to provide services for the poor.
So the government's saying that it will get the money back, but bearing in mind the amount that we're talking about, is that likely? How difficult is it going to be to track down all those millions?
Well, it's all very well for government to say that they are going to try and recoup this money. The question is, how are they going to do this? Now, as I said earlier, we know that these services were not delivered in these various municipalities, and we know now why it hasn't been delivered, because the money was stolen from the bank. But at a parliamentary meeting today in Cape Town, members of parliament from all political parties had called for a thorough investigation. They saying that those who were involved in the looting must be brought to book. They're calling for criminal charges to be laid against these people, and they also saying one of the ways to get the money, to recoup some of the money that went missing, is to go to the executives of the municipalities, the executives of the bank, and also to go to some of the politicians who allegedly benefited from the looting of the VBS bank. But whether they're going to get all the money back and exactly how much they're going to get back remains to be seen.
So tell us more about who is amongst these 53 people suspected of being involved in the graft that brought down the bank.
Well, at the moment, according to a report, they're talking about executives of the bank. They're talking about municipal managers who benefited. And they're also talking about some politicians, although they have not named these politicians. In the report, they mentioned a brother of the Deputy President of the opposition one of the opposition parties, the Economic Freedom Front, Floyd Shivambu. They're saying that Floyd Shivambu's brother Brian had received 16 million rand into his account and that he had passed on 10 million rand to Floyd Shivambu. And this money was apparently found its way to the EFF. Of course, the EFF has denied this. They saying that the ANC has been complicit in the looting of this bank. And of course, during the debate earlier today in Parliament, there was a lot of blaming the one political party, blaming the other political party. And you have to remember that South Africa is having a general election next year. And so there's a lot of finger pointing at various political parties about who is responsible for the looting of the VBS bank.
Thanks very much. Aisha Ishmael there for us in Cape Town. Now, Nigeria and Benin have opened up a new crossing post. Their shared border is one of the most used in West Africa. The presidents of both countries were at Tuesday's inauguration and say that its opening will help make intra-African trade and economic integration easier by creating jobs and opportunities for traders and travellers from both sides.
Our ambition is to achieve our goal as soon as possible. The free movement of people and goods, and the effective integration of our economies, and even of our people, who are the same if it weren't for the damages wrought by colonialism.
Now, Cameroonians are hoping that the re-election of Paul Biya to another 7-year term will mean a change for the better rather than an extension of the worst of the status quo. The 85-year-old's led since 1982, and everything depends on how he interprets his new mandate, which was confirmed on Monday, particularly with regards to the country's Anglophone crisis. Laurent Berstecker has more.
After Paul Biya's re-election for a 7th consecutive term, Cameroonians are now expecting him to make good on his campaign promises.
He needs to make things better for everyone, and especially for young people. He must create jobs for our youths.
Cameroon's economy was long considered a model of excellence in the region, but it's begun to show signs of decline in recent months. Many businesses have shut down, while poverty and unemployment are on the rise. An economic slump that's partly due to the volatile security situation in the north, where Boko Haram continues to carry out attacks, and in the country's Anglophone regions, where separatist groups have taken up arms against the government and regularly target Francophone and foreign businesses. The crisis has already displaced over 300,000 people, and ending it is likely to be high on President Biya's list of priorities.
We hope that he can bring our Anglophone and Francophone brothers together so that Cameroon can know peace and prosperity once more.
Another challenge for Paul Biya will be to convince the opposition, which has rejected the election's outcome, to recognize his victory.
Now, 8 Cameroonians who left the country over 6 months ago for Kuwait have recently been reunited with their families after a harrowing time away. The young girls say that they were sexually assaulted and humiliated whilst working as maids in the Middle East. Our correspondents caught up with Prudence, who recorded a video about her ordeal that helped get others out.
It's been over 6 months since she last saw her neighborhood and her family. Prudence's family have gathered for an emotional welcome at their modest home in Douala. Prudence is one of 8 young Cameroonian women who have recently returned home after having been forced into near slavery in Kuwait. Hired to work as a housekeeper by a smuggling network, she was instead sold off as a slave. Prudence was supposed to earn an equivalent of 180,000 francs per month, but she says she was never given a dime, even though she worked 20 hours a day.
I worked from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. and I had very little sleep. I started having pains around my waist. I told the woman, but she told me it was nothing serious and that all I had to do was drink water. Her children, who were military men, beat me all the time. They told us we had to work and not disobey.
In a bid to escape captivity, she decided to inform her family of the situation 1 month ago. After fleeing, Prudence got admitted into a migrant detention center in Kuwait City.
All these women lying down, they are suffering.
Amongst those she met at the center were about 20 other Cameroonians. Most were traumatized by their experience. Some had been victims of sexual assault and were too afraid to talk about it.
I risked my life to make that video. None of my Cameroonian sisters were ready to take that risk, but I did. You have to protect me if the Kuwaitis come after me. Some of the girls have been sexually assaulted. Their bosses raped them and got them pregnant.
Prudence and 7 other Cameroonian women were repatriated thanks to financial support from their families. They also got legal support from an NGO working to take down human trafficking networks between Cameroon and Kuwait.
People should know that they can no longer continue this kind of human trafficking, because we will hunt them down. We are more than ever determined to fight any form of trafficking.
Meanwhile, authorities in Cameroon are trying to repatriate 15 other young women still imprisoned in Kuwait. The Ministry of External Relations has promised the girls will be home soon.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.
Idi Amin Dada, Uganda's despotic leader, presided over his country in the 70s. He is remembered in very different ways. Some recall the hundreds of thousands who were killed and tortured. However, those who were born after that horrific era laud his lesser-known accomplishments. For them, he was as a builder, a nationalist, and a separatist, the leader of time in Uganda's history, which they regard as a bygone golden era.
We revisit the compiler of Idi Amin Dada here on France 24.